you if you've stuck with us this whole time. We started this when quarantine started, and I think I counted that this was either day 70 or 71 of quarantine. But it's because we couldn't meet face to face anymore, which I think that's going to start changing and easing up a little bit. So we appreciate you guys doing the study with us. We hope to do face-to-face studies after this. Christina's going on to Notre Dame in August, so if we do something online, it might have to be through a Zoom type of video thing. So we'll just see what God has for us. But we're just going to do kind of an overview of James today and talk about the things that we have learned. And so we were asked to, if you did the study workbook, to come up with our favorite verse in James. And so there's lots of ones. When I think of James, before I really studied it, I always thought of be a person of action and the difference between faith and works. So I would think that James 1:22 would be a good one. Do not merely listen to the word, and so deceive yourself. Do what it says. And what did you think of, Christina?
Well, I think a good one is James 2:26. For just as the body without the spirit is dead, so also faith without works is dead. So still hearkening back to that theme of we need to not be hearers of the word, but doers of the word.
Yes. And then James 3:17, but the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere. Peacemakers who sow in peace reap a harvest of righteousness. So there's a lot of things we can dwell on there and kind of work through, whether we're peace-loving, whether we're the peacekeepers or the peacemakers, considerate, submissive, all those things. And we talked, I feel like, a lot about fruit in this study, so that one kind of jumped out at me.
And then in James 4, this is a good one to come back to and apply to our lives every day. 4:7 says, submit yourselves then to God. Resist the devil and he will flee from you. Which we think a lot of times about how the enemy is attacking us, or things in our lives are not going the way we want them to, and the scriptures are very clear. If we speak the name of the Lord, if we follow after the things of God and not the things of the world, then the devil has no authority or power over us. So even if we go through trials and temptations, the evil in the world and the enemy has no power over us.
Right. God has won the victory as the last word. And I think through this season, we've had to submit ourselves to what God has planned for us. Is obviously none of us plan to stay home for 70 days or to have, and you might not have stayed home, but you may have had just your life changed by the different restrictions we've had to deal with. So none of us planned on that or could have foreseen or foretold that, but God knew, and we have had to submit to what He has for us. I've had to submit to a lot of different things with my classroom. I've had to go this week and take down everything off the walls and pack up everything, and that is not what I wanted to do at all. But I had to submit and do that and understand and trust the process of what's going on there. And I don't know in the fall how things are going to look, and I know a lot of you parents are feeling that same way with your kids and your education, and we're just having to trust in the Lord and not fear, and know that whatever comes our way, we're going to just try and make the best out of it. So that has been a challenge as well.
The last verse I'm going to talk about is James 1:25. So it says, but the one who looks intently into the perfect law of freedom and perseveres in it, and is not a forgetful hearer, but a doer who works, this person will be blessed in what he does. So I like this verse because it talks about the law and persevering through trials, and it also talks about being a doer who works, and that we will be blessed through our works. I also am amazed that we picked James to do our study on, and it has talked so much about things that we have been going through in this corona season. we're going to go through each of the points, but one of the things that has really stuck with me through this series is the passage, I think it's in James 4, where they talk about they have planned their lives out and how we shouldn't be self-sufficient on what we have done or our plans, but we really need to wait upon the Lord and seek His will first.
Yes, a lot about submission, and so we were going to go through and talk about what genuine faith looks like through the different weeks and just kind of review what we've been talking about. And I think as we've looked at this genuine faith, it was a lot of introspection, like we were talking about looking in the mirror. So it's not about what other people should do, but it's really about what our lives look like, and are we reflecting Jesus in our lives. We just listened to Pastor Robert's sermon, and he talked about an encounter with a person, and he's like, after I go away, what do they think about Jesus after their encounter with me? And we should think about that and dwell on that. So in our social media posts, in our face-to-face conversations, though they're less now, what are people thinking about Jesus when they see my life? And I hope through this study that they're seeing a genuine faith, and we're going to go through those different things now to kind of overview what we've talked about. And maybe there's one or more than one, as with me, that we still need to work. We're a process on.
I think also when we go through these points, they should be encouraging to us, because a lot of times I think we doubt our own faith, or there's so many things in the Bible that we could be doing, we're doing wrong, and if I'm a follower of Christ, I should be perfect. But all of these things are things in our lives that we can point to and say, our faith is genuine because we have these things that we're going to talk about.
Right. And it's encouraging that God sees us through Jesus, and we ask forgiveness and mercy, and just our sanctification process shows that we are striving to be more Christ-like, and that's what we need to do. So, genuine faith, we talked about perseveres in trials. So, the first thing we went through is the trials that come our way. And so we know as Christian believers that we're going to face trials, and that we are to hold on to our faith and stand firm. And we know, and we talked about how those are going to be working for our good.
The second week we looked at genuine faith resisting temptation. So we talked about Jesus' temptation when He was in the desert for 40 days, and we all have temptations in our own lives, and those temptations can look different person to person, but we resist those temptations by asking for wisdom from the Lord of what is good and what is right, and by fleeing. So we don't give in to looking at an item or going and being close to the sin, but we're not going to give in to temptation. We need to flee it all together.
We talked about, I see it, I want it, I take it. Mm-hmm. And then we also talked about how we don't blame God for those temptations. And then we talked about how genuine faith is actively obedient to the Word. So we're not just hearing the Word, but we're doing the Word. So we're putting in action. We don't merely just do this study, but we actually do things and change our lives because of that. We take whatever nugget or truth or that God's working on us. So we might pray more. We might send cards. We might make that phone call. We might try to be slow to speak and quick to listen. And it almost seems like the thing we talked about, God would put something in front of me and I would fail. But at least it came to my mind instead of just, I didn't even think about the thing I just did. So I think that's God working and helping us in that process and hopefully becoming more sanctified.
And I think that while obviously James has put a lot of emphasis on doing, we have to be in the Word and hearing it in order to know what to do. So, normally we would go to church and listen to our preacher and the sermons, but we don't have the opportunity to go in person and fellowship with other believers now. So we have a unique opportunity to really be hearers of the Word for ourselves and have autonomy in studying the Scriptures and hearing it. We have to hear it before we can do it. So then we talked about genuine faith does not discriminate. So we talked a lot about poor versus rich, and obviously in this past week we've seen a lot of discrimination between the racial tension in our country. And so I think of Paul, I want to say it's in Ephesians, when he talks about there is no rich or poor, man or woman, Jew or Gentile. Jesus obviously did not discriminate against people while he was here. I think of the woman at the well who Jesus pointed out all of her sin and her past and still said, but I love you and I forgive you. So we need to look at people through the eyes of Jesus rather than our own judgmental eyes.
But it makes me think, all through this passage, James is calling them brothers and sisters. And there's the passage where Jesus says, you're my mother, you're my brother, you're my sister. And if we think of each other as that relationship, there's nothing I wouldn't do for Christina. She calls me and I come and I do what I can for her. And that's how I should treat everybody. And it's a hard call, but we're supposed to love our neighbors as ourselves. And just again, looking in that mirror and seeing that you're doing that with everybody, and not judging them either by their skin color or their social status. So then it said, we talked about genuine faith does good work. And so again, faith without works is dead. So it's a big theme, and that was a lot of our verses that we talked about.
So in some of the Gospels, you hear of Jesus doing these things and then telling his disciples to be quiet about the good works that he's done. And a lot of times, especially with social media nowadays, we do a good work and we want to show that we do a good work. Or we do a good work and we want to tell everybody, hey, look what I did. Or we feel, because we want to feel good about ourselves. But I think one of the reasons that Jesus does that in the Gospels is because even if we do good works with good intentions, if we post about it or tell someone about it, it is near impossible, at least for me, to not feel pride in myself after I've shared that. And so we're called to do things in secret a lot of times because we're being protected from our sinful nature.
Right. And it shouldn't be pointing to us, but it should be pointing to God.
Right.
And I have really struggled with, I want people to know, and I'm excited about what I do as a teacher, but I don't want to post everything I do. Obviously, I don't want to, there's privacy involved with my kids and that. But then when somebody, a parent or something, will post about me and I'm not doing it myself, it's so much better. And it's just, I don't know how to deal with that. That could be a really big discussion about social media and posting, look at me and look at everything I'm doing.
Well,
instead of waiting.
Even like when I play in the worship team, and I think it's been heightened because we record it and then have to watch it back, but it's so hard. I really find it difficult when I mess up to not make that reflective upon me, and that is indicative of how I view the whole thing. So I should not be down on myself or be worried that I messed up, when really the whole point is to give glory to God. Who cares if I play a wrong note? We're praising the Lord. So it's something that I think we all struggle with, trying to not be prideful in the things we do.
More of you, less of me. keep working on it.
So after that, we talked about choosing our words with care. And we talked about how terrible the tongue can be, but also how the tongue can be used to lift people up and to spread the good news of Christ. Mm-hmm. And we talked about how we can use, if we can control the tongue, we can control everything about ourselves. And when we were listening to the study this week, she made a good point about how we all use our tongues sinfully, but in different ways. So while I may find it really easy to criticize others, someone might struggle with gossip or struggle with losing their temper, but somehow all of our sins come out of our tongue.
Mm-hmm. And I think if you have a tongue issue, which we all do, it's a heart issue. So it's what you're thinking about and what you're meditating on, and that's just going to come out. And I feel like sometimes it comes out before you even know that it came out. It's like, what did I just say? So thank goodness we have mercy and forgiveness, and we're still working on that. In genuine faith, we talked about hates the wisdom and the ways of the world. So we talked about being a friend of the world or being a friend of God. And so we want to reflect that in our lives. And just like we were saying, what are people going to see when they view us? Are we posting more about the world, or are we posting more about God? Mm-hmm. Are we talking more about the things of God or the things of the world? And it's easy to look around and just feel the fear, or just see everything. It's good to take a break from the news and the media and the social media, because it can bring you down of everything in the world. And God's not fearful. He's not anxious. He's on his throne. He knows what's going to happen, and he just wants us to love others and love him.
And I think that the call is not to try really hard to hate the world, but rather, if we are following after Christ, we will love the things of God, and the love of God will cause us to hate the world, rather than hating the world will produce the love that we should have for God. So next, we talked about genuine faith submitting to God's will. So we talked about how it is sinful for us to say, tomorrow I will do this, the next day I will do this, and become self-sufficient on ourselves. Mm-hmm. But we need to draw near to the Lord and submit to what the Lord has for us. And we talked a lot about if we ask for wisdom, wisdom will help us discern what the will of God is. And the will of God is not a checklist of things. You need to do A, B, C, D, E, and F. But rather, I think we use the cookie analogy, where there's a lot of cookies that are good, and we need to take one and show Christ's love in whatever we decide to do.
And then genuine faith speaks with integrity, that we want to be humble. We want to make our yes, and our no. And that we pray for one another, and that we also bring another brother or sister back to Christ. And so we show Christ in our actions. And so our leader's guide this week talked about genuine versus counterfeit, and she went back into Matthew to talk about the Pharisees questioning Jesus and trying to see if he was a genuine person and what he was saying matched up with their teachings and who he was. And one of the things they were always like trying to trap him or make him stumble and test him a lot. And so when we're trying to see if something's genuine, we do a lot of testing. And so that's when those trials and temptations might come through. But she went to Matthew 22:15 through 22. And it's a story of the money. And so we're going to read that. The Pharisees went out and laid plans to trap him in his words. They sent their disciples to him along with the Herodians. Teacher, they said, we know that you are a man of integrity and that you teach the way of God in accordance with the truth. You aren't swayed by others because you pay no attention to who they are. Tell us then, what is your opinion? Is it right to pay the imperial tax to Caesar or not?" But Jesus, knowing their evil intent, said, "You hypocrites, why are you trying to trap me? Show me the coin using for paying the tax." They brought him a denarius, and he asked them, "Whose image is this, and whose inscriptions?" "Caesar," they replied. Then he said to them, "So give back to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's." When they heard this, they were amazed, so they left him and went away. So she made the point here with integrity that they talk about Jesus and how great he is, and that he's a man of integrity, teaches the way of God, he knows the truth, you're not swayed by others, you don't pay attention. And those are all good things that we were talking about in this study that Jesus did emulate. But they're using it in a way with his words. We're talking about that intent again. They're using it to kind of butter him up, or you're this kind of man, so what do you say about this?
Yeah, I think of in Genesis when the serpent is talking to Eve, and he's like, don't you want to have all the knowledge? Like, sort of telling her that she is better than what her current circumstances is, buttering her up before.
Right. So, it's all about the intention, and he's showing the difference here between where your allegiances are going to lie. And so, as a lot of times where Jesus does, he gives them a question or gives them something else to think about, and he knows that if he says, "Don't pay your taxes," that's going to incite Rome. And if he says, "Yeah, you're under Rome, pay your taxes and submit to the authority," that would upset the Jews. And so they ask him to show them a coin. And so back in those days, our leader guide told us that whoever was in power would make a coin with their likeness on it. And so they were showing that this coin was saying that the Caesar was God, and that it belonged to Caesar. And so every time they would have this coin in their possession, it was kind of the propaganda of the day. So I have this coin, and I'm saying that Caesar is a god, and I'm under his rule. And whether or not they had other money and could do life a different way, they had to have this propaganda in front of them. So Jesus is kind of calling them out, saying, well, if you have this money, you're already sinning and saying that this is your God and this is who you're following. So that's why give the things of the world back to the world. They can be of them. That's no use to me. And she made a big deal about talking about how this coin having the inscription and the image of your own self imprinted on it, and saying that you're your own God, whereas if we're a coin, kind of using that metaphor, we should have the inscription of God on our coin and on our hearts, and that should not be worn away by the world.
Yeah, so when he says give to Caesar's what is Caesar's and what is God's to God, he's saying that the coins may be Caesar's, but the people who are made in God's image are God's. And so we need to give our entire lives back to the Lord and to submit to his will.
Right. So if you think about your life as a coin, and that you were made in the image of God, and when we had a fall in the garden and we've all sinned, that image starts to be worn away and stained, and it's not as how God intended it to be. And when Jesus comes and redeems our lives, he imprints his image on that coin, and we are a new creation through him. And God sees us as we are supposed to be. It's the rough edges, and the image becomes clearer through his sacrifice of his blood. And so it's just a great image to me of being that image bearer, and how Jesus has reclaimed me and that coin for his glory and forever and eternity. And so if you think about through this study being that image bearer and what people are going to see when they see your life or your coin, and who do you belong to? So if you have a coin and give Caesar what is Caesar's, do you belong to the world, or is your coin saying, I have been redeemed by God, I am his and he is mine, and my life belongs to him? And so once you have that relationship with Jesus, it cannot be worn away, it cannot ever go away. It's imprinted permanently on your life, and you cannot lose that salvation. You belong to God. You are loved and you are forgiven. So I hope through this study that you have felt that, and that you have drawn near to him, and you have felt God draw near to you. We love all of you and hope to see you soon in person and continue learning about God and loving one another.